Okay, I promised you in the last video I would follow up after doing the brief overview of what was going on with the 292 inline 6-cylinder Chevy and all the stuff that we had to do to make it ready to get ready to dyno to take down to Westech. And so now we need to take a look at the two other motors, and I'll do them both in this video because there's less information to talk about on both of those. So we'll be able to combine them both, starting with that 455 Buick. Now, first of all, I'm really excited about testing the 455 Buick because I've never run one. As a matter of fact, when I called the guys at Westech, I said, hey, I need to run a Buick. And they're like, that's great. We've probably run one of those that I can remember. So that means that the same situation as with the 292 Chevy 6-cylinder, they don't have a number of things that we need to actually put that thing up on the dyno and make it run. So a lot like the 292, the Buick is going to require a steel flywheel, which is a little more difficult for a Buick because a lot of these cars that came equipped with that 455, most of them were automatics. I mean, these were big full-size cars, so most of them are automatic. So I've got to locate a steel flywheel. Again, doesn't really matter about applications, just as long as somebody makes a steel flywheel that I can put on there so that we can attach the drive plate to. Same thing with the 292. There are no motor mounts on the Buick, so I need to come up with motor mounts for the Buick. But again, that's not an insurmountable thing. Even if there aren't any factory motor mounts, which normally we don't use anyway, normally we use a solid motor mount, I can also always attach somewhere to the block. I can make a piece of L or, you know, weld something up fancy, whatever we want to do. But we can get that part of it taken care of. The one thing that I did notice about the Buick is that, and this concerns me a little bit, it's the water pump. Not that I can't replace the water pump, it's very easy, but right now this water pump on this motor is locked up. And that doesn't have me concerned about being able to replace it. That's an easy deal, and that's a cheap and expensive thing. I'm sure I could find a water pump at the local auto parts store. But the problem is, it has me concerned about what else is going on in the motor. Because if that thing's locked up, it's rusted, and I'm wondering what the inside of the motor is going to be like, if there are going to be other problems. We won't know until we cleaned it all up and actually, you know, try to start it up and run it to find out what's going on. But that concerns me. The other thing that concerns me is that, obviously, like with these other guys' motors, I don't have Mazir electric water pumps for all of these, so we're going to have a mechanical water pump. And the issue with that is, I don't have the water pump pulley for the water pump, and I also don't have the lower crank pulley to drive the water pump pulley. So I'm going to have to come up with pulleys for both of those, a top and an upper and lower pulley, just so that I can then figure out some kind of drive belt to drive the water pumps. Now, the other option that we've done before is we just force feed the water pump water with the dyno, and that also works. And we've done that sometimes with jet boat motors and stuff, and that's not really a problem. So if worse comes to worse, we'll be able to figure it out, but the easy way is just to put pulleys on there, put a new water pump on it, and call it a day. Obviously, when we do that, we are also going to have to take the thermostat out, just like the other motors, because the tower is thermostatically controlled, and we don't have to worry about that. We don't ever run thermostats when we're on the dyno. The other concerning fact with the Buick, and something I'm definitely going to have to address, is there are no like on the 6-cylinder, we had the factory exhaust manifold, which is nice, which allows us to do a number of tests before we even put headers on it, which the headers are on their way from the guys at Summit Racing. So, but with the Buick, I don't have headers right now. I'm going to get some. I also don't have stock exhaust manifolds. So I need at least one of those to even run this thing on the dyno. The guys at Westech don't have any long tube headers for them. So I'm going to have to source the shorty, either shorty headers or stock exhaust manifolds, and I'll just probably buy a set of long tube headers, or unless I can find somebody that's a Buick guy. Maybe Jim Bell might have an old set or something I can borrow from. So that would be cool. It does not have a carburetor on it, which is not a big deal. Not like the 6-cylinder. If it didn't have a carburetor, it's just a standard 4-wheel. I can put anything on there I want. We've got Quadrajets and we've got Hollies, so whatever pattern that is, that's not a big deal. We're going to be swapping intake manifolds, and we can put something else on there. Like I said, the ideal thing is I want to run it stock. So I'd like to get as much stock stuff on there as I can. Then we make upgrades so we have a baseline starting point and we can get to where we want to go. I do like the fact that the Buick has an HEI distributor on it, which is interesting. And it looks like a fairly newish cap on there. So I'm hoping, I haven't pulled the cap off, but I'm hoping for good things there. I think it's got a cap and rotor. There are a couple of plug wires missing, but that's easily replaced. We've got a ton of plug wires laying around. So I like the fact that it has the HEI, which means not only I'm hoping that the distributor works, but it's got plenty of ignition it's got plenty of spark energy basically, and I can run nitrous with it, and I can do all kinds of stuff, because I'd like to run, even on the Buick, if it's all there and it's working and it's happy, I definitely would like to run boost on it, and I may not even take it apart and put ring gap in it. I may just run it the way that it is. On some of these motors like this, even more so than a more modern motor than an LS, these guys, the rings definitely wear on them, so I'm hoping that we've got extra ring gap built in. I have no idea how many miles are on, or even the condition or anything, but so you just kind of take your chances. So with the Buick, there were a few things that we need to take care of. I mean, none of them are really insurmountable. It's really a cool motor. Obviously, I'm going to get rid of some of that chrome stuff. We'll get rid of the air conditioning, because that's not necessary. We'll get rid of the alternator and all that stuff. It does have shiny valve covers on it, which is always good, so it will look good, at least in the photos. Somebody even painted that, unless that's the factory paint. If you're a Buick guy, let me know if that's that kind of factory red color there. I am going to have to obviously put oil and filter in it, and just like with the others, I probably will take the distributor out, and we normally prime them with a drill or something so that we can find out. Just make sure when we put them up there, and a lot of times I don't even put them up on the dyno when we do that. When we prime them, I'll just roll the motor over into the dyno. We can hook it up to the oil pressure gauge on the dyno, and I can just spin it and just make sure, hey, look, there's something. It has oil pressure. If it has no oil pressure, you go, okay, something's terribly wrong here. So we'll be able to do that with a Buick, and put a new oil and filter in it. Heck, we might even throw in some synthetic oil, because, you know, it probably deserves it, especially after we're going to do what we're going to do with it. So I've got some other parts coming for it. We obviously have a carburetor. I need to get headers. I've got a Sniper nitrous plate for it. All of that stuff will work. I'm working with the guys at TA Performance, which are awesome. I'm looking at the higher end stuff for the secondary program of this thing, you know, ported heads, aluminum heads, and different intake manifolds, different camshafts, and seeing how far we can go. But before I do that, we will definitely do milder combinations with smaller cams, stock heads. I might even have the stock heads ported, or do a little bit of bulwark and stuff myself with a mild cam combination. You know, you got to do that stuff first, because that's what the average guy is going to do. That's what we have planned for the Buick. Now let's take a look at the Cadillac. The Cadillac is a little different story than the Buick or the 292 inline six-cylinder Chevy, because the Cadillac was actually a runner and then it got hurt. So I'm not sure what they did with it. I've heard various stories and stuff from after this motor was in the Gremlin, Freiberger, and you know, they were doing their shenanigans with it. So I don't know how badly the thing is hurt. I know I can tell you what's missing and what I'm going to have to address before we can run it on the dyno. But the other thing that's going to have to happen is this motor has to come apart. It's a later Cadillac, a later 500, so it's the lower compression version. And that's okay. That shouldn't hurt us at all. As a matter of fact, since we want to run boost on it, maybe that's going to help us. But it has everything that it needs. As a matter of fact, it has a little more than it needs for our needs anyway. I always like, as I said with the Buick and with the 292, I like to start off with a stock motor, and that would be good, except this one is not stock. It has an aftermarket cam in it, I'm told, a small crane cam. It also has the aluminum intake manifold. So right off the bat, even if the thing was healthy, I would like to change those things. I'd like to take that cam out and put a stock cam back in, and then put a factory intake manifold on there, and just run a 4-barrel. I'd like to put stock exhaust manifolds and run it as close to stock as I can. There are obviously a couple of other things that are missing. There's no motor mounts and there's no flywheel, so we have to go through the same thing that we go through with the other two before we can put it up on the dyno at Westech. The exhaust manifolds obviously represent a problem, and the thing is, I've reached out, and guys in the Cadillac community have offered help and stuff, but you don't want to have somebody send cast iron exhaust manifolds or a cast iron intake manifold in the mail, because it's just really heavy. So it would be nice to source something here locally close to Westech where we're testing. So I'd like to put that back into stock trim if we can, and then run it in that manner. We'll take it apart and find out. I'm hoping that it's just a bearing. Maybe the crank needs to be turned, and even if we have to replace the crank because it's scored or whatever, we can do that. I'm hoping that rods are not bad. I think that the pistons are okay, because even if it had an oiling issue, that doesn't normally hurt things like pistons. So I'm hoping the bores are all okay and all that stuff, and we can fix whatever that is, and then put it back together. Obviously, it needs a carburetor like the others. There is no distributor on there, so I'll have to come up with a distributor for the Cadillac. We'll do the same thing. We'll make sure that it oils up okay after we put it back together. And so it's maybe not quite a rebuild, because I'm hoping to reuse as many parts as we can, but at least it has the water pump and it has the pulley on it, so we'll be able to just put a belt on there and run that, because again, we're not going to have any sort of electric water pump for a Cadillac, because I'll bet if I ask, they don't even remember the last time they ran one of those. I'm excited about the Cadillac. I wonder how hard, like with the Buick, how hard that is to find a flywheel for that, because how many manual trans 500-inch Cadillac factory motors were there? I don't know that Cadillac ever put a manual trans behind this motor, so I'm sure somebody's got to make one, and if not, we can come up with, you know, some way to do it. We have run stuff on the engine dyno before with a flex plate attached to the drive plate, so we definitely could do that if we have to. You know, we can get clever and make all that work. I've got to get a distributor for it, and plug wires and plugs and all that stuff. Obviously, we're going to have to do something with the oil after I'm sure it's got bearing material in. I'm really excited actually about taking that one apart, and I'll do a disassembly video so you guys can kind of see step by step with me what's going on and what we find. You know, we can take the rod caps off and find out what's going on there, take the main caps off and go, oh yeah, it's definitely this. Even just to begin with, just dropping the pan is going to be interesting, because that may tell you right there. I don't think it has a I don't remember it having a filter on it. I'll have to check and see, and we'll show you in the video through the magic of editing. We could cut the filter open if there is a filter there, and I could take a look at it and see if there's any shiny bits in there. You know, that's the last thing you want to find, but at least it tells you whether there was a problem or not. And I was told, Freiberger told me, that when they saw that there was oil pressure was going away, that they shut it off. It's roadkill, so sometimes you don't know. We'll just have to take it apart and find out. But those are the things that are missing with the Cadillac. Those are the things that are missing with the Buick. And I think we can get all of that stuff taken care of. I'm really excited to run it. We're going to run the 292 first, and then follow that up with the Buick. And by the time we get, you know, knee deep into both of those, doing modifications to them and get all the parts for those, hopefully we can get the Cadillac serviced and turned around so we can get that up there right away. And while all that's happening, this is obviously a whole logistic kind of nightmare. I also want to try to gather together the parts for the Cadillac. So if we can get the factory exhaust manifolds and the factory intake manifold and have a good start at it, because the other thing I'd like to do with the factory exhaust manifolds, both on this one and on the Buick, and we already have it for the Chevy, is that's how I want to make the first turbo kit. We want to run that with the stock exhaust manifolds to show you what the low buck approach is. If you go get one of these motors from the dyno and it has the stock exhaust manifolds on it, you have essentially turbo manifolds. Look, we're not going to make 2,000 horsepower with those, but we're not trying to, especially with something like the Cadillac and the Buick for that matter, that we're not going to be revving very high. So if you want to run 6, 8, 10, 12 pounds, whatever, if you're feeling really spunky, you can certainly do that with the stock exhaust manifolds, and they will make boost and it will make power, and you'll be happy with it because you'll have a boosted Cadillac or a boosted Wildcat 455, you know, the Buick. So it'll all work out. I'm Richard Holder, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff, and I'll keep testing.